Well, hello and welcome along. I'm Justin Briley, your host for the next hour and a half here on Premier Christian Radio. This is Unbelievable. Before we get into today's show, let me say, if you're listening and you'd like to get hold of a copy of the Unbelievable Conference DVD, don't forget that's available on our website, or you can go direct to the Unbelievable booking page, premier.org.uk/DVD. Great to have you with me, though, today, whoever you are and however you're listening. Let me tell you what's coming up today.
You're unbelievable.
Well, welcome along to the show that aims to get you thinking on a Saturday afternoon, and of course online at premier.org.uk/unbelievable. It's the show that gets Christians and non-Christians talking, but today's topic is really an ethical issue, which we may find differences of opinion among Christians and non-Christians over, but is often, if you like, associated with Christian ethics, the issue of abortion. And we're going to be looking at that in the context of recent UK statistics on abortion that were released in July, and asking today, are there good reasons for abortion? So alongside the statistics, we're going to be looking at the justification for abortion and what those are and how they stack up. My guests today on the programme are Wendy Savage and Madeleine Flannagan. Let me tell you all about them right now. Well, as I say, two guests. One of them has been with us before, Wendy Savage. If you go back in the archives of Unbelievable, and I'll post a link to it with the podcast of this programme, has been on before to talk about abortion. Wendy is spokesperson for Doctors for a Woman's Choice. She's had a long career in medicine, and she's long been an advocate of the right for women to choose to have an abortion. In fact, she pioneered abortion services in New Zealand before the law there was liberalised, which it has an interesting link in that sense to my other guest on today's programme, Madeleine Flannagan, part of the husband and wife Christian apologetics blog M&M, which you can find at mnm.org.nz. She's got a background in law and legal philosophy, but they've both been involved in anti-abortion, pro-life work in the past. And she is coming to us from New Zealand today. And it's great to have her on the programme where she and her husband, as I say, Matt, do a lot in the area of Christian apologetics, and they've come into my sort of radar over the last year or so, and I thought about time we had them on. And Madeleine has kindly put herself forward for this one. So let's introduce both our guests first of all. Wendy, thank you for joining me on the programme today. Good to have you back.
Thank you.
You've been sort of a spokesperson for Doctors for a Woman's Choice for some time now. I understand the organisation, its main aim, if you like, is campaigning that the law should be changed to allow women themselves to decide on whether or not they have an abortion rather than having to have the agreement of a doctor.
Well, at the moment they have to have the agreement of two doctors, unlike any other operation, and we believe that it's up to the woman to make her own decision after she's received the information that she needs to make that decision. And it is the woman who looks after the child that's born if she doesn't have an abortion, and so she should be the one who makes the decision.
Obviously, this is a hugely emotional issue in many ways, and you kind of fail to come across your fair share of those who, you know, in the pro-life / anti-abortion, whichever label you want to put on it, movement. Where do you feel it's heading at the moment? What's the feeling you're picking up? Do you feel like the law is going more in the direction you'd like it? Do you feel that there's perhaps a movement in the other direction? Recently, of course, pro-life campaigners won their appeal in the High Court to allow statistics to be revealed for the reasons for abortion back to 2002. Did you welcome that, or are you worried at that this is going to be used for purposes you're not altogether happy about?
No, we didn't welcome that because it seems an invasion of the woman's privacy. It's always a difficult decision for a woman to make to terminate a pregnancy, and particularly if it's for fetal abnormality. These are wanted pregnancies. The woman has already been pregnant often for some time, and when she's told that the fetus has got some abnormality, it's a really difficult decision for her. And the thought that that decision, which is a private one between her family and the doctor, could be rummaged over. We've got all this Murdoch problem at the moment, haven't we, with the phone hacking, and the idea that somebody is going to find out about your personal medical history and put it on the front page of one of those tabloid newspapers adds to the burden that women have. And I don't think that it's necessary. I mean, we had the numbers of reasons, and it was just the question of whereabouts those were taking place, and that gives the anti-abortionists a chance to try and find out, by whatever means they have, this confidential information. I think it's a retrograde step. On the wider abortion front, after we lost the opportunity in 2008 to bring the 1967 Act into the 21st century, there has been a steady trickle of anti-abortion propaganda. And the latest, of course, is this effort by Nadine Dorries, who has teamed up with Frank Field to try and take away the chance for the woman to receive counselling at the place where she goes on to have the termination performed.
I mean, both the people you mentioned there are obviously Christian MPs, and this is traditionally, been seen as a Christian issue, a hot-button sort of ethical issue for Christians. I mean, it'll be interesting to come, I think, onto the issue, which is, rather than going, as it were, through the legal aspects today, I was hoping maybe to focus in a little bit on the fundamental issues of why babies might be aborted and why the what the fundamental grounding for that view is. Essentially why a woman's choice supersedes, if you like, any perceived rights of a child in the womb. We'll come to that, but let's first of all introduce Madeleine Flannagan, our other guest on today's programme. As I say, part of a husband and wife duo on the M&M blog in New Zealand. Interesting connection, as I mentioned, Madeleine, that part of Wendy's background is pioneering abortion services in New Zealand. But you yourself have been in the anti-abortion movement for some time, pro-life, depending on your terminology. Tell us a little bit about where your interest in all this stemmed from yourself, Madeleine.
Sure, Justin. I think for me, my opposition to abortion came about well before I picked up any Christian influence in my life. I looked at the issue when I first heard about it as a teenager. I think when you first find out what abortion is and all that sort of thing, and thought, well, it just struck me as odd that a born human being can't. There's no justification or basis for killing someone who's been born, but somehow there is when it's inside a woman, and I just. No one could ever articulate for me what the morally relevant difference was between a born member of the species, human, and a preborn member of the species, human. And whenever I sort of heard talk, the debate was always slated in terms of, how hard it was for women and how harrowing it was and all that sort of thing. And it just struck me as flawed, like something was being missed in the debate. And I guess I just sort of had that interest in it from that point. And I don't know, just different circumstances in my life kept bringing it back in front of me, if you want. And I ended up being involved in a university-based pro-life group, and ended up going on to become the national president of that organisation. Students Organised to Uphold Life, what we're called. And
what kind of activities did you sort of do to further that? Was it sort of lobbying sort of for laws to be changed, or was it sort of standing outside abortion clinics and that sort of thing? What kind of things were you doing to try and...
Primarily being a university-based organisation, it was about discussing ideas and looking at information and sort of getting into the philosophical arguments behind it, looking at the justifications offered for abortion and seeing if they stacked up, looking at statistics and sort of just raising awareness of the debate, trying to call the debate back onto grounds that were a bit more based on reason and facts rather than rhetoric and, labels and sort of the more emotive stuff.
Yeah, what often tends to flash upon our screens when we think of pro-life organisations is people, as I mentioned, sort of outside abortion clinics holding placards of dismembered fetuses and things. I mean, what do you think of that approach? Is that valid? Is that sort of part of the way of doing these things?
Yeah, I mean, in New Zealand that's hard to do because no one knows where the abortion clinics are. They're inside the hospital somewhere. So, you can stand outside a hospital and wave a placard, but you can't really pick at the clinic. And, when I was in America, I did a tour over there, sort of visiting different organisations, and we did actually go and stand outside some clinics and do the placard waving thing. I think it's perfectly legitimate. I mean, if we accept freedom of speech in society, then it's about people simply expressing their views. And it was important to me that any placard I was near had a rational argument on it. I didn't want anything sort of emotively worded. And, like you said before, there's emotive reasoning, you're thrown sideways around this debate, and it's on both sides. And, if you think something is killing, then and it's being legalised by the state, then, you can kind of understand why people might wave placards over that.
Just out of interest, really, how does the abortion laws stack up in New Zealand as compared to here? Here, there's the 24-week legal limit, after which there has to be a particular medical reason for going ahead with it. And last year, obviously this will break down differently per capita, but there was about 189,000 abortions in the UK. Do you know what sort of the equivalents are in your neck of the woods?
Yes. Basically, you can get an abortion in New Zealand. Again, it's not abortion on demand for any reason. I think the law is probably pretty similar to your law, but the cut-off dates are different. Most abortions have to be done within the first 12 weeks of gestation, so most are performed around about 9 weeks. They can be done between 12 weeks, and there's sort of no real upper limit. They usually try and cut it off at 20, but occasionally in our stats we see terminations being performed quite late in pregnancy, sort of getting closer to 30 weeks occasionally. But the bulk are done between 12 and 20 for sort of extra special grounds, and I think in your media they're called ground E abortions. Here it's just things like danger to the woman's life, fetal abnormality, those kinds of grounds you can get an abortion after 12 weeks for, but before that it's more woman's life in danger, and danger to woman's mental health is sort of the ground everything gets pushed through on.
Well, today on the programme, we're asking the fundamental question, are there good reasons for abortion? If you'd like to get in touch, perhaps you've got personal experience in this area, perhaps you have a particular view, then do get in touch via email at unbelievable@premier.org.uk. You can also phone and leave me a voicemail message, which I can play out on a future edition of the programme, 08456 52 52 52. And select the option for leaving a message for me on Unbelievable, 08456 52 52 52. Don't forget also this programme and related links. I'll post up links to 2 previous programmes on abortion we've done in the last few years at premier.org.uk/unbelievable, which is the website of this programme.
Unbelievable with Justin Brierley.
Well, with me in the studio today, Wendy Savage, spokesperson for Doctors for a Woman's Choice. If you like, a pro-choice advocate in the studio today, and on the line from New Zealand, Madeleine Flannagan, who's part of the husband and wife Christian apologetics blog mm.org.nz. She's got a background in law and legal philosophy, and we're talking about sort of some of the kind of fundamental sort of justifications for abortion today. Now, I suppose what I should begin by asking, Wendy, is what are, in your view, good reasons for abortion? Are there bad reasons for abortion as far as you're concerned?
Well, I don't think women ever make this decision lightly. And I think I don't know how old Madeleine is, but she probably isn't as old as I am. And so she's probably never seen women die from illegal or self-procured abortion, which I did when I was younger. And I think that is the ultimate justification, that when it comes to the decision, ultimately the woman does make the decision herself. And sometimes, if the law isn't there to allow her to have a safe legal abortion, she would take the law into her own hands. And we know that worldwide abortion is still a huge killer, and that whether the law allows it or not, it still goes on. So as a doctor, it seems to me it is our duty to make sure there is a safe legal system. And now about 90% of all abortions in Britain are done in the first trimester. But sometimes women do come later than that, and they have good reasons for why they feel they can't continue with the pregnancy. And the question of fetal abnormality, I mean, if a couple feel, or a woman feels, that she cannot cope with bringing up a handicapped child, then she shouldn't be forced to do that. And the idea of compulsory pregnancy is something that I think doesn't receive very much discussion in the media.
I mean, this is one of the aspects of these statistics. Since about 2002, the specific reasons for abortion weren't released until this year, when this High Court ruling meant that they did release back to those missing sort of statistics, as it were, of why abortions took place, especially after the 24-week cut-off period. What's interesting is that, yes, obviously there were reasons given of various physical problems, the grounds for the abortion. I mean, but some of them can be, if you like, lived with, or certainly sort of operations done to improve them. So clubfoot, for instance, was a number of cases of clubfoot that babies were aborted for. What does it say, I suppose, is the question about our attitude towards those living with disabilities of one kind or another, whether it be a learning disability or a physical disability, when we have this particular sort of rule that babies with those things are allowed to be aborted right up to, as it were, birth, really.
Well, you know that very few of them are done over 24 weeks, and it's exceedingly rare to go over 28 weeks. And women don't apply for abortions after 28 weeks, in my experience. I think it doesn't tell us anything about society's attitude to people who are born. And I mean, these aren't babies; these are still fetuses. And the English language is very rich in words. We start off with embryos, then we have fetuses, and when the fetus is born, it becomes a baby. It's not a baby when it's in the womb, it's a potential baby. Now, I think that society's attitude towards handicap isn't related to the abortion issue. You take that terrible case of Fiona Pilkington, who killed herself and her handicapped daughter by setting the car on fire, because a lot of mindless people were harassing that family because her daughter had learning difficulties. And that's got nothing to do. You bet you find that those people are anti-abortion as well. So I don't think you should link those two things. Human life is, of course, sacred, but we send people off to fight in wars. And one of the reasons I insist on calling them anti-abortion is so many of the anti-abortionists aren't against war. They're not against hanging. They tend to be single-issue people, and I think we have to keep that in mind.
Well, Madeleine, let's go to this issue about that Wendy's helpfully raised there. The language we use. What do you think about that? Fetus, embryo, baby. What is this difference between the fetus in the womb, the baby when it's been born? Do you think that's a valid kind of distinction?
Well, definitely there are different terms, and those are proper, Latin terms that have got a lot of history in medical, areas. And I don't have any problem with using the correct terms, but, they're definitely, just because something has a different name doesn't mean it has a different moral status. I mean, we call babies that are very little newborns, and then when they're a bit bigger they become infants, and then they become children, and then they become teenagers and adults, and we have all these different terms we use in society, and they're informative because we understand what someone is speaking about when they use them. But just simply giving something a different name doesn't mean that it has a different moral status. And you can't simply assert that the being that comes out of the woman and has magically got moral status before the law, something different, there was something different about it that it was lacking, that meant it didn't have moral status sort of 1 hour before it was born, or several months before it was born. I mean, you actually need to not just assert that, you need to, find grounds, find criteria, and establish that.
Are you saying, though, that a baby, a fetus at 3 months has the same rights as a baby that's just been born in a hospital, a healthy, full-term baby?
What I'm saying is that we know that at birth there's a human being that can't be killed, that the law protects, that we as a society have an issue with anyone harming. And that baby, we know, comes from the fetus that's inside a woman. So at some point between conception, because we know that there isn't anything that can turn into a baby before conception, you need conception to have happened. So some point between conception and birth, a human being comes into existence. Now, we're not, we can have a dispute, and we do have a dispute in our society as to what point that is. But until we settle that point, we can't just say it's okay to kill that entity, whatever it is. We need to actually establish that. It's like if you go hunting, for example, and you're shooting deer in the forest, and you know that there are going to be people walking through the forest, and you see a rustle in the bushes, you're wrong to shoot, because you need to establish first that the thing you're going to kill is not a human being. And until we have that issue settled, then we need to err on the side of caution.
Well, let me ask you then, Wendy, on what grounds do you distinguish between the fetus in the womb and the baby that then suddenly has these rights, as it were, that need to be protected? And it does lend itself to these strange situations where you have a hospital, and in one part of the hospital, doctors are fighting to save the life of a baby that's been born prematurely, and you may have in another part doctors killing a baby, a fetus, let's say, in the womb at a similar point of gestation. So it seems counterintuitive that on the one hand that we pour all our resources into saving it, on the other hand we don't. And why? I suppose I'm asking for you, what makes it different once the baby is born to the fetus in the womb?
Well, I think you have to concentrate on the woman, right? The fetus is part of the woman until it's born. And you have to look at the rights of the woman, and in most cases the woman will want to nurture the fetus and bring it to term and look after it afterwards. But sometimes she does not feel able to do that. Now, my own personal view, and it may not be totally logical and legalistic, is that as the fetus develops, it gains more rights. And the old cut-off point we had was 28 weeks, when there is natural viability. I mean, a number of babies, even without neonatal intensive care, would survive at 28 weeks. So 28 weeks seemed like a perfectly reasonable cut-off point where you said, now the rights of the fetus at 28 weeks plus are as great as that of the woman, and we won't do an abortion after 28 weeks. Now, Madeleine's language when she was speaking earlier was quite correct, and she used terms like fetus. And she said that she hadn't, except in the States, gone outside clinics with placards. But if you imagine a woman having a difficult decision to end a pregnancy, going to a clinic, having to go past people holding banners, shouting slogans. I mean, it happens all the time in Northern Ireland. outside the family planning clinic where women are just going to discuss whether or not they want to continue with the pregnancy, and they're greeted with these zealots who cannot let them make up their own mind.
But for you, this is the distinction. It's about the woman's right over her body up to the point you feel. This is the point where the baby can exist independently, as it were.
Or has a chance.
Or has a chance to exist independently. I mean, I suppose, and we'll come back to this in the next section, the baby will continue to be entirely dependent on the woman, even after birth, you know.
Absolutely.
So it's an interesting distinction. But we've got to take a break, and we'll come back with Madeleine responding in just a moment. You're listening to a discussion focusing not so much on the legal aspects this time of abortion, but more the moral foundations for abortion, the rights of the woman over the rights of the child in the womb. And indeed, we've already talked about the terminology we use. How loaded is it, you know, when we talk about a baby versus a fetus? Madeleine's website talks about feticide, which is an interesting sort of concept that sort of has its own sort of overtones, and so we'll continue in just a moment's time here on the show that aims to get you thinking. Serious issue today, abortion, and if you'd like to get in touch, I'll be giving out the ways that you can get in touch with the show in a short moment's time. Do join us again after a quick break.
You're listening to Unbelievable on Premier Christian Radio.
I'm Justin Brierley, your host here on the show that aims to get you thinking on Saturday afternoons. Don't forget we're online at premier.org.uk/unbelievable if you want more links, more resources, if you want links to previous programmes where we've dealt with today's topic. As we ask, are there good reasons for abortion? Wendy Savage is our pro-choice spokesperson in the studio today. Spokesperson for Doctors for a Woman's Choice, and after a long career in medicine, she's been an advocate of the right for a woman to choose. Madeleine Flannagan is on the line from New Zealand. She's a Christian, part of a husband and wife team with a background in law and legal philosophy herself. They've both been involved in anti-abortion groups for some time, pro-life groups. We're asking today, with these recent statistics that came out in July on the number of abortions in the UK, not just the number though, but also reasons for those abortions, and a number of the papers sort of particularly focused on some of the late abortions after the 24-week period, which were done for various types of disability, physical disability, etc., as well as learning disabilities. Madeleine, let's come back to you at this point, because what for you is the issue here? We've already had Wendy talking about the fact that she feels that there's a natural, perhaps, cut-off point when the baby assumes rights is when it can potentially exist independently of the mother. What's your problem with that as a definition of when a baby assumes the special rights of human, human rights, as it were? Why for you is that not satisfactory?
Well, it seems to me to be a little bit arbitrary, is my first reaction to it. And the second reaction is that the dependency issue, it doesn't go away at 28 weeks. A fetus is still very dependent on its mother's body right up until it comes out of it, and it can't live without her body, and it continues to make demands. It continues to be inside of her and part of her in the sense that Wendy was talking about before. And then even after birth, the newborn makes demands on the mother's breasts quite often, and definitely on her hands. And if you've ever cared for a newborn, you'll know all about how much physical demand is placed on your body after birth. It's almost, in fact, I found it very exhausting and more exhausting than being pregnant. So if this entity, if the criteria for when it gains rights is when it can survive, or at least has a chance of surviving without being dependent on the mother's body, it sort of seems like that criteria, hasn't been resolved. I mean, it's still got that dependency. That dependency is still there, and it remains there right through pregnancy to birth, and it remains there after birth for quite some time.
I mean, others do put different types of reasons, those who are still in favour of abortion, but I read recently, I think it was on your blog actually, Madeleine, another person suggesting that it's about when brain activity starts to occur, and that should be the point at which we start to think about the fetus as having rights of a human. I mean, perhaps, what do you say to that kind of a justification for, a point at which abortion is okay up till, and then there would have to be extra special reasons after it?
Well, what I say to that is that there is brain activity very early on in pregnancy. There's some, and it depends what type of brain activity you're talking about. And most often, what people say is things like like consciousness and self-awareness and the ability to sort of reason and that kind of thing. But none of those things kick into a child's brain until quite some time after birth. In fact, I think Peter Singer in one of his books, I think it might have been Practical Ethics, documented that it might be as late as 18 months before a born child develops self-awareness and sort of rationality. So, if you're going to make the criteria, brain act that has some meaning or some sort of, is somehow different to the brain activity of animals. For example, a newborn cow is got more brain development going on than a newborn human has, and we eat cows. So, if you're going to sort of make that criteria, you're definitely embracing abortion right through 9 months and probably some form of infanticide as well. And you're being quite inconsistent if you then, going to go and have a hamburger or something.
Feel free, by the way, ladies, to just interact with each other. Don't feel like I have to be your go-between. But your response to that, Wendy?
Well, I mean, I'm taking a pragmatic position, really. And the thing is, women request abortion, and it's fewer and fewer as the pregnancy advances, because the woman has a feeling about the fetus and what responsibilities she has towards it. And often her request for an abortion is because she feels that she can't look after a child properly if it were to be born. And in my experience, it is extremely rare for a woman to ask for an abortion after 28 weeks. And therefore that seems to fit in quite nicely with the natural viability. But I don't think we should really link it with that. We know that there isn't, as Madeleine said, proper self-awareness or a fetal consciousness, and that probably the fetus is in a kind of comatose state in the womb because the hormones going around and the rest of it. So I think we have to look at each case as an individual. Why does this woman want an abortion, and are her reasons sensible reasons?
At what point, though, does as it were, do you believe that there is a point within the womb when the baby's rights become more important than the woman's right to choose? I mean, or would you advocate actually abortion for any reason, social or otherwise, up to the point of, giving live birth, as it were?
Well, there are people who do take that viewpoint, and it's a perfectly logical viewpoint.
Are you one of them?
I'm not, but I'm saying it's because women don't ask for it, and so I think that women themselves have got a cut-off point when they feel that the fetus has got a right to continue.
What if a woman wanted to have an abortion because she'd had a genetic test and had found out that the baby had green eyes, or that it was a female and she wanted a boy, or it showed markers for homosexuality, or something like that? I mean, especially if, say, she's under 28 weeks and she's had this test, and maybe she's under 20 weeks. If it's her body and her choice, and it's totally up to the woman, and if we should just trust women to be good moral agents and not question them, then, why are we having conversations about cleft palates and club foot, and why are we shocked by that?
I don't know. I mean, we should be letting women make their own minds up.
Do you think women should be allowed to abort children because they wanted a boy instead of a girl?
I think that's a difficult one, but I think that if a woman feels that she really doesn't want a girl or a boy, as the case might be, what sort of mother is she going to be? And I don't think she should be forced to go on with that pregnancy, even though it doesn't seem like a good reason. I know that amongst certain communities there is a tendency to want male children, and one of my colleagues who wasn't at all pro-choice got into the difficult stage where a couple came, they'd had 4 girls, they wanted a boy, and he said, all right, you can have a test, and it turned out to be a girl, and it was 18 weeks or something, and having said he would do it, he did it. But I think you can only look at India to see the effect of that kind of pressure, where the ratio of male fetuses to male babies to female babies is quite distorted.
Well, absolutely, but isn't this all to the, as it were, argument of Madeleine, which is that we shouldn't allow people to make decisions about the life within them on the basis of these kinds of things? Is it a sort of slippery slope from choosing to abort a baby because of physical disabilities and learning disabilities to going all the way to selecting your baby on these other grounds of simply aesthetic, I prefer brown hair to blonde hair or whatever it may be?
The law in India doesn't allow that. It's against the law to do that. And so this is, and I don't think it's women's choice. I think it is that the society's pressures on women. In this country, we haven't had a huge slippery slope of people having abortions for all sorts of trivial reasons. I mean, we used to have all these people saying they're having it because they want to play in a tennis match or because they want to go on holiday or this, that and the other. It's far, far more complicated than that. And if you've sat and listened to women saying why they want to have abortions, as I have, for thousands of women, they don't take this as a trivial issue. They do think about it very seriously, and I think we should trust them. I mean, women are the people who are left holding the baby, aren't they?
Madeleine,
we don't determine right and wrong based on how women feel, and when we talk about what good grounds are, which is the topic of this show, you have to sort of wonder. We need to have a discussion about the humanity of the fetus, and it needs to come back to that, because if the fetus is a human being, then we don't permit killing of human beings on economic grounds, on, the risk that someone might not be a good mother in the future. We can't kill a human being because it might get in the way of our career. And I'm not for a second suggesting that anyone finds abortion easy or comes to these decisions lightly. I'm quite certain that people don't. But the point is that they are still coming to these decisions for these reasons, and these reasons are not reasons we would accept if we were talking about newborn infants.
Well, I think I have to go back to the pre-1967 Act in this country, where women who, faced with an unwanted pregnancy, took the law into their own hands and they died. Abortion was the leading cause of maternal mortality from 1952 until the triennium after the Act had passed, and then it fell so that deaths following abortion are virtually wiped out. And I think that's what we have to think about. What is the alternative to legalising abortion? It's having illegal abortion, and therefore women dying as a consequence.
Were they dying in numbers as high as close to 200,000, which is how many people are dying from abortion currently in your country?
Well, not people, they're fetuses.
But isn't this the point that we're arguing? How do we determine?
And that's the base. Yeah.
Yes, sorry. Go ahead, Madeleine.
The basis of your the basis of your argument is that in order to stop people from killing themselves, we need to kill hundreds of thousands of other people. And like in New Zealand, this argument comes up, the same argument that, thousands of women will die if we don't have legalised abortions.
Well, not in New Zealand.
Choose to break the law and they choose to kill another person, and in the process they harm themselves, there's a sense in which, and I know this sounds harsh, but I'm a woman too. I've had children. I've faced pregnancy when I didn't want to be pregnant. I get that it's hard, but it's not an argument we would accept in any other circumstance, that if you're choosing to break the law in the process of trying to kill or harm someone else, then, society
So
really
tough
should
luck,
have a lot of sympathy.
Have you read, Madeleine, Margaret Sparrow's book about abortion in New Zealand? Because it's really interesting.
I have read one of her articles.
She's written a whole book, interviewed people who'd had illegal abortions and traced what was happening. And the thing is, I know that it's 189,000 abortions, but in 1935, when they were talking about whether the law should be legalised in this country, it was estimated that there were at least 100,000 abortions done illegally, and one of the people on the committee thought it was higher than 100,000. So what you do when you change the law is you don't create abortions, you just transfer them from illegal to legal, and that is the most important thing, I think, to explain why we have a law about abortion, which I agree is a very serious issue, and that's why we count the numbers to make sure that they're not going up astronomically. And what you saw in Romania, when they changed the law to prevent women having abortions, was immediately the death rate from pregnancy went up, and then slowly the number of pregnancies went up, and then the number of pregnancies came down slowly as the number of women dying went up. So women will do anything to get rid of a pregnancy if they don't want it, just like they'll do anything to get pregnant.
People will always break the law, and changing a law is not going to stop that. But we do know from all the sociological studies that get done around, how people in society act, depending on what's lawful and what isn't, is that you do see a reduction in the behaviour when there's a law prohibiting an action, and you see more of it when there is a law saying it's okay, or that it's lawful to do that action. So I'm not sure that I think that we have the same amount of abortion we would have if it was illegal. I think that we would have less. And I also know from when I did look into some of Margaret Sparrow's articles that some of the statistics, when you go to government organisations like Statistics New Zealand, and I'm sure you've got a similar body in the UK, show that the number of deaths is a number that's often, the number of maternal deaths from abortion when it was illegal is often a number that's just incredibly blown out of proportion by how it's told anecdotally and what the actual official government stats are. And you've got to remember that most illegal abortions are actually done by people with medical training. We have antibiotics these days, so looking at figures, from the earlier part of the, like in the 1920s and things like that, which is where a lot of the stats are plucked from. Antibiotics weren't as widely available. They weren't as good as they are today.
So you're advocating that women should go to have backstreet abortions because they'd now be safer than they used to be. I mean, in this country, the statistics about maternal deaths are meticulously collected, and they have been done since 1952. But right back in 1935, abortion, the reason they set up this committee was because they were so worried about the number of women dying as a result of illegal abortion, and that was related to the Depression. And in the world at large, I think it's 11% of women dying in association with pregnancy. 11% are in association with unsafe abortion.
But again, the solution to that is to kill a whole lot more people. And I mean, that's the thing. You can't just say they're not human beings and then reason from there. You actually need to provide evidence.
I guess this is the point.
Criteria that do stand up to criticism, and that's the thing. They don't. I mean, if abortion is killing a human being, then...
A potential human being.
Not every woman who has an illegal abortion is going to die, so you're going to automatically save more human beings by making...
This is the main difference, though, isn't it, between you both ladies? That you refer Madeleine to a human being and Wendy refers to a potential human being. Now, why? I suppose that the key question Madeleine has for you, Wendy, is why potential? On what sort of grounds do you say this fetus is not a human being until it reaches either this, let's say, 28-week period or it's fully born.
Yeah.
I mean, on what grounds? I mean, is there something significant about coming out of the birth canal that makes someone human when they were inside the womb? This is the difficult thing, isn't it? And aren't we in grave danger of making a serious moral mistake if we've actually got it wrong? And it is the fact that, you know, as many people see it, a child in the womb is as much fully human as a child outside the womb.
Well, I mean, people are entitled to that viewpoint, and I mean, I was interested that the acronym of the organisation that Madeleine was the chair of was SOUL, and there is all this debate, isn't there, about when the soul goes into the fetus.
Do you believe in a soul, though? I mean,
personally, I don't believe in a soul, you see. But I mean, they had all these arguments, and Aristotle said that it was sort of 6 weeks, and then they had different times for male and female fetuses, and this is all theoretical. And mine is a pragmatic position that women are going to make this decision. Now, I accept Madeleine's point that there will be some women who, if there isn't a legal route, will continue with the pregnancy and they won't try and get rid of it. But you don't know which one that's going to be. And the pragmatic position is that women faced with an unwanted pregnancy will do anything to get rid of it. Therefore, let's make it safe, legal, quick.
Well, we'll leave this for the moment, because obviously we're a fundamental loggerheads here of your different definitions and on what grounds you would use for defining whether a child has rights or not. I mean, let me just say this, that last week I was at a school fete, but the school happened to be a school for children with learning disabilities. And it was a wonderful sight to see, about 50, 60 young people with a variety of different learning disabilities, some of them Down syndrome, others with other issues. But singing away, wonderful, expressive joy on their faces, joy on the faces of the parents watching them. And it made me think, why do we live in a society where it's legal to abort after this cut-off period? Whether we think that's a slightly arbitrary period or not, we'll leave to one side. But that it is legal to abort a baby with Down syndrome, for instance, than what does that say about our view of the worth of a person with Down syndrome? To me, well, Madeleine, I won't say. Let's let you make this case. What's your feeling?
It says that we as a society think that it's okay to kill someone if they're different, or if there's something about them that we feel is less than perfect, and it's an attitude towards people with disabilities in our society that they're somehow of less value, and I think that is a particularly revolting message to send. But that's effectively what we're saying. I mean, I'm a mother of 4, and 2 of my children have diagnosed disabilities, and I didn't know about either of the disabilities until well after they were born, and it's very hard work. But the suggestion that, if you'd gone back in time, they'd be better off dead, that's ridiculous. Life and human beings are sacred, and they don't have to be as perfect as you and I to have value and human worth.
You would agree, I'm sure, Wendy, that a person living with a learning disability has as much value as someone without. But why is it different in the womb? Why is it more acceptable to abort at a late stage a fetus with signs of learning disability?
Well, I think the question is, does the woman feel that she'll be able to cope with caring for a child with learning disabilities or some other kind of physical disability? And I mean, I have the utmost admiration for people who are dedicated to looking after the vulnerable in our society, but not everybody has got those qualities. And if somebody's already got 2 or 3 children and they know that they're going to have a child that requires an enormous amount of care and attention, they may feel, I cannot do that. I mean, I've also got 4 children. I'm very lucky that I had 4 children without any disabilities. But I think women are the ones who are going to have to do this. And I know that when they brought in the fetal anomaly screening program for Downs, one of the reasons they did that was that a third of people with Down syndrome have such severe disabilities that they need institutional care. And it's very hard for a person to put their child into institutional care. Very difficult decision for them. And obviously the idea that society as a whole didn't want to look after people in long-stay institutions, and the idea that we put people from those institutions into the community where they would be looked after in a more friendly family way was a good one. But it is an extremely expensive way of doing it. And I think that if one looks at it from the point of view of the woman or the couple who are looking after the child who's handicapped in one way or another, then that makes it understandable.
My youngest child, my youngest of 4, was diagnosed with quite a severe autistic spectrum disorder. Now, he is high functioning, but he's still incredibly difficult. He cannot go to a mainstream school. In fact, he can't even go to a special needs school. He has to be at home. And every medical professional who's ever worked with him has said that. He is incredibly hard work. He screams, he throws things, he hits, I have days, I have whole weeks, months where I don't think I can cope. I have episodes where I just feel completely like my life is out of control as a result of this child. And I didn't get the diagnosis until he was 2. Now, if we're supposed to think about the woman and whether the woman can cope with it or not, then why don't I have the choice to have him put down now? And I mean, that sounds incredibly reprehensible, what I just said, and there's a reason for that, and that is because he is a human being. And because although I have hell time with him sometimes, he's also incredibly sweet and incredibly beautiful and incredibly lovely, and I know that if I work really hard with him, and it's probably going to take a good 10, 15 years, before we start really turning corners, that we will actually get to a point where things get a lot better and he's not this hard, and he actually will be able, his prognosis is that he will, once he's at adulthood, be able to function on his own in society. Now, if you follow this reasoning through as to why a woman can abort when she has a disability, she's faced with a child with a disability in the womb, well why can she do it in the womb, but why can't someone who was in my situation getting a diagnosis 2 years after birth have the same choice? I mean, again, we're seeing that there's this thing that's not being dealt with, the morally relevant difference between the preborn child, preborn fetus with a diagnosis and the post-birth 2-year-old infant with a diagnosis that isn't being discussed. It's just being assumed.
We are going to take a quick break, and then we'll just have a chance for some final thoughts from you both. A fascinating discussion, but really one that opens up all kinds of emotional issues, as well as these more philosophical issues about when life begins and when we ascribe rights and value to a human being. But if you'd like to get in touch, as ever, you can do that via email. That's unbelievable@premier.org.uk. Look forward to receiving those and reading some out on a future programme. You may wish to get in touch on the Facebook page or our Twitter account. They're both available from the Unbelievable website at premier.org.uk/unbelievable. The Twitter is @unbelievablejb if you'd like to get in touch with me that way with your thoughts on today's programme. Okay, we're going to go to a quick break and then final thoughts from my guests today on the subject of are there good reasons for abortion. I'm joined today by Wendy Savage and Madeleine Flannagan. Welcome back to Unbelievable with me, Justin Briley, this Saturday afternoon.
Unbelievable with Justin Briley.
To Dr. Wendy Savage and our Christian guest, Madeleine Flannagan, who is speaking in a pro-life capacity today. But that's to come in just a moment. If you want to find out what's on next week, let me tell you that come back again next time or online, and you'll hear a fascinating discussion for next week on the Bible. Bart Ehrman has become well known, especially in the United States, as a critic of the Bible. His best-selling book, Misquoting Jesus, sold thousands and thousands of copies. And his newest book, Forged, is similarly casting doubt on the veracity of Scripture, the truth of Scripture, particularly in the area of whether the documents of the New Testament, the letters, various epistles and things like that, were actually written by the people who claim to have written them, or were they forged? Were they falsely attributed to people? Was it someone else trying to pass themselves off as Paul or Peter? And he's going to be in discussion on that with Darrell Bock of Dallas Theological Seminary. Darrell is another eminent Bible scholar, but he believes that there isn't such a strong case as Bart Ehrman does for what's technically called pseudo-picography, I think. But that will be a fascinating interchange if you can tune into that at the same time next week. Two top-flight scholars really debating the issues there. So tune in for that at the same time next week. Right now, time to conclude today's programme.
You're listening to Unbelievable on Premier Christian Radio.
Our topic today has been, are there good reasons for abortion? Recently, the latest statistics on abortion in the UK were released. Continues to be a slight upward trend in abortion figures, but significantly, statistics for the first time in a few years were released on the reasons for abortion. And we've been talking about whether it is morally acceptable to abort children later on in pregnancy because of physical or learning difficulties, disabilities, that sort of thing. When exactly life can be said to begin, and why we might ascribe rights to the child in the womb, fetus in the womb, however you like to term it, or to a child outside the womb. Two excellent guests who joined me today and really put both sides of this very eloquently and very well. Wendy Savage, spokesperson for Doctors for a Woman's Choice, with me in the studio. Madeleine Flannagan on the line from New Zealand, and her background is in law and legal philosophy. And both, I think significantly, both of you mothers yourselves, so neither of you, as it were, is unfamiliar with the difficulties and the challenges of motherhood. And Madeleine, you explained I hadn't realised when I got in touch with you some of that background of your own experience with your autistic son. But let's, as we conclude today's programme, Wendy, for you, the woman will always essentially the rights of the woman to choose will always outweigh any rights of a child in the womb. That's the impression I'm getting. Is there a point at which you would say, actually, no, the rights of the child are more important? You've said it's this 20. Would you prefer actually this cut-off limit to be extended rather than the direction some people want to see it go, which is reduced in line with other countries in Europe? You'd like it to see it actually more ability for women to have, as it were, on-demand abortion up to...
We don't have abortion on demand. Women have to convince two doctors that they...
But even that, you'd like to see that changed as well.
I would have preferred us to stay at 28 weeks because I don't think linking the gestation at which abortion can be done to the issue of viability, artificial viability, might bring it down, but the woman's needs are still there. If we had it still at 28 weeks, then this differential between the abortions done for fetal abnormality would not show up, because the reason that those are done late is because often the diagnosis is not made until quite late, because the fetal anomaly scan isn't done until 22 weeks, and so you might not make the diagnosis as early as if a woman's just coming because she can't cope with the pregnancy anyway. Madeleine's point about what's the difference between killing a 2-year-old and doing an abortion at 26 weeks, which I have done, is that at that stage the fetus is still completely physically dependent on the mother alone. a 2-year-old can be looked after by somebody else other than its mother, but if it's in the womb, then it's part of the mother's body until it's born. So I think that being born does make the cut-off point, I see, pragmatically.
You said you've performed an abortion at 26 weeks. Presumably it does feel worse performing an abortion at 26 weeks when you have to handle a physical, a child that looks more human than an embryo.
It's extremely difficult, and it's emotionally very, very hard. But
why is it emotionally hard?
Well, because obviously you see a fetus that is almost a baby, as it were, and all those looking after the woman find it hard. I mean, nobody does this lightly, but one of the ones I did at 26 weeks was an 11-year-old girl who had been raped in the lift, she said. But later, having gone to the child psychiatrist, it turned out that it was her mother's boyfriend who had raped her in the house and impregnated her. This little girl was sitting there colouring in little dresses to put on those cardboard cut-out dolls. She was a child. She could not have gone through with having a baby. And the midwives looked after her because it was 26 weeks. And many of those were Christians, and they weren't, ardent pro-choicers, but they could see that in her case it would be really cruel to put her through going through a pregnancy and giving birth to a live child.
Well, Madeleine, to come back to you, I mean, we started out with the question, are there good reasons for abortion? And perhaps in that instance where there's potentially even a threat to the mother's life, that might be, even in your view, Madeleine, a reason to abort, where the mother's right to life, as it were, trumps the life of the child within her. Would that be fair to say, Madeleine?
Yes, it would. In law, we accept that there are certain grounds for committing homicide, the killing of a human being. There are a couple of grounds that we accept it for, and one of them is the self-defense or defense of another as well. So that would cover both the doctor performing the abortion and the woman seeking it. But as in law, when you've got, there has to be a real threat to your physical safety, and there has to be no other alternative. Like, you can't use self-defense as an excuse if you had the option to, run away or get in a car and drive off or something like that. And so if you've got the option to deliver the fetus rather than terminate it when your life's in danger, then that is the road that I believe you should take. And I mean, it always sort of stuns me that people talk about the woman's life being in danger, and that's why we have to have these late-term abortions in the sort of, second and third trimesters even sometimes, because to perform an abortion that late in the pregnancy, you simply, usually, from my understanding, is that you deliver the fetus, and you first of all kill the fetus and then deliver it. Now, if the woman's life's in danger, surely it'd be quicker to just deliver it rather than, pausing to take the step to kill it. And then the woman's life's not in danger, and fetus isn't dead. So, I'm always sort of aware that while I think that is about the only ground I would accept for abortion, it seems to be used to justify, quite late-term abortions when, I'm dubious that there's any medical condition that exists that requires the death of the fetus rather than simply the removal of it from the mother's body.
Can I just say something about late term? Term means the end of pregnancy. So you can't have a late-term abortion. What we're talking about is later abortions, not late term. This is a horrible American use of language which has crept into Britain and obviously New Zealand as well. So it's
obviously New Zealand, yeah.
So it's a later abortion.
Well, that semantic issue
later
aside, yes. Look, I'm sorry we haven't got more time because there are so many more areas that I would have liked to have discussed, and even within the bounds of about an hour or so of discussion, there's much that we could have spoken on. But thank you both for being involved in the programme today. I will put up a link to Doctors for a Woman's Choice.
On abortion.
On abortion, yes.
Yes.
Doctors for a Woman's Choice on Abortion is the full title of the organisation that Wendy represents. And I'll put a link to their website, as well as to the blog of Matt and Madeleine Flannagan. M&M is the title they go by, m&m.org.nz. And you'll be able to find some of the resources they have on the issues as well there. In the meantime, thank you both for being with me today.